The Phoenix Suns got their bounce-back win on Wednesday night in Houston, but that's just one step on the path toward getting this franchise back where it wants to be headed into the new year. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, what can they build off from that win, and what awaits them on this next homestand? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Suns your first listen to close out the week. Happy Friday. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe wherever you are finding the show. We're free and available everywhere, so all you got to do is hit that button on your favorite podcast app or YouTube. Get a new show in your feed Monday through Friday, all season long. Become an everydayer. Get locked onto the Suns right along with me every day. Aaron Edwards is here, as he is, to close out every week, and we have some good things to talk about for the first time in a while, which is a breath of fresh air. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. We'll have more from PrizePicks later on in the show, but let's get right to it. Aaron, the Suns obviously winning in Houston on Wednesday night, 129-113. The type of game that I think a lot of us expected to see all the time for this Suns team, but felt like a breakthrough, felt like a return to form. I don't know how fans feel necessarily, but either way, a good win. I'll just throw it your way, a big picture. What do you think mattered the most coming off of that game? What is the thing that will follow them down the line outside of, okay, it's great to beat the Rockets?
I said this before before Katie or before Bill got here, and when we were trying to decide who was the point guard now and all that, I didn't book to get lost in being a point guard. I said that a lot on the show, I think. And then at one he did get.
All right, so just pick up answering my question again. I think that's the easiest place.
All right. Well, like I said before the season started, when we were trying to decide who was going to be the point guard and who was going to do the more on-ball stuff, I didn't want Booker to get lost in not being the best shooting guard in the NBA and being a point guard. And that's kind of what happened. Like, he was really good at the beginning at being a point guard, but he kind of got lost in it. And I think what we saw yesterday is putting Book off ball and making him a two guard again just makes everything run smoother. Like, KD doesn't have to do all the pin downs and sit in the corner and all that. KD can start this, and Book can be a two guard again. And I think things just look smoother and run better that way.
Do you feel like it's possible to have Durant be like basically the point guard for this team? Because that's kind of what we saw. I don't think that's a complete no, but that's pretty different than we would have expected, even with your, obviously all of us kind of had that concern that you're talking about, but is put the ball in Durant's hands more the answer, or what do you think long-term is the solution? Or do you think it's just, I mean, because it could just be something where every night it's kind of somebody else. That's a little tough to map out, but where do you feel like the best solution is if you do want to get Booker going a little bit more in that way and make everybody better by balancing things out?
I think it's two things. Like, I think Beal is going to have to show teams that he can get by them. And even when he's initiating, I don't think he's going to get the doubles that KD and Book were getting, like, obviously. But I think KD, like we saw with Houston, they were scrambling yesterday. And I think when he makes quick decisions off the double, the defense starts scrambling immediately. And I don't think even with Beal on the floor and initiating everything, like, he's going to put the defensive pressure like that much more, like as much as KD does. So I can see KD like initiating the offense more, just because I'm not sure Beal is going to get that much kind of attention that he's going to get and make defenses scramble like KD's going to make them scramble.
Yeah, it's so tough. I mean, it's the obvious thing we kind of knew was happening or was going to happen when this team was put together. It's like I believe that it's going to work. I don't think the NBA requires you to have Chris Paul on your team anymore to win. But you even just think about a lot of the teams that have that less traditional structure of who's handling the ball and everything else. They've been together for a long time. You know what I mean? And even that fact is a disadvantage for the Suns where, yeah, Denver doesn't have a point guard, traditional. Boston doesn't necessarily have that. Philly doesn't necessarily have that. But, Maxey and Embiid have been playing together for Maxey's entire career. Jalen and Jason in Boston have been playing together for their whole careers. Denver, those guys, the whole career. Like, to do this so quickly is part of, I think, what's happening here, even if that's kind of frustrating, might feel like an excuse to fans. But I definitely think there can be a better balance. I trust Booker and Durant to feel out that balance better than most guys, even with a lack of chemistry or a lack of continuity at least. So the way that Durant, to your point, was reading the game yesterday, and I think feeding off of the hot shooting that a lot of those guys had, when all of those different ingredients are clicking, he can be the point guard for this team. But what happens when teams start pressing him? You really want him dribbling down the floor against, Jared Vanderbilt or something? Probably not. When guys aren't hitting shots and defenses are able to play off of him, it's going to get harder, and I think that's where it's going to have to be mixed up. But this lineup that we saw start the game, I didn't have these stats ready because it was right after the buzzer last night when I did the show, but the 5 guys who started last night, now they didn't get to play together a ton even last night because Nurkic had foul trouble, but after last night's game, 127 offensive rating, 104 defensive rating, basically a 23-plus net rating over 122 minutes. That to me feels like the thing that has to linger. And obviously when Beal comes back, he probably slots in for Gordon in that lineup. But those 6 guys to me have proven when they're out there, it's going to be really hard to beat them. And to have Vogel finally start that lineup and for it, the players to reciprocate and prove to him that it works, that felt really big to me, and obviously couldn't have come at a better time from just how bad the previous games had been. But I just think that's the identity of this team, whether it's comfortable for Mr. Defense Frank Vogel or not. That's how this team is going to win, and I think they proved that on Wednesday, playing as well as they did.
Yeah, I think that the speed in which they played was a lot better. I think the decision making, you can tell they went into the game saying, "Give the ball to KD, double's going to come," and we're starting from there. And it was every time. It was KD gets doubled, hit Grayson, make the scramble, corner bucket. I think it took a while to get there, but it was KD still wanted to do KD stuff, even regardless of the double, and Book still wanted to do Book stuff regardless of the double sometimes. But I think if this offense is really going to hum, just start it early, see the double, and make them scramble and get open shots. And if they fall, the team's going to look pretty good. And another big part was just having a big out there that didn't need to score. He knew what his job was out there, and I think that's a big find. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but I think having a big out there that takes up space, knows exactly what he's out there for, and can kind of defend the rim, that helps a lot.
Well, and the last thing I will say on the lineup stuff and the offense is part of why I was so surprised that Lakers game ended up being the first part of a downturn for the Suns in a way is I just thought that they were so unique in their personnel. There's so few teams in the NBA that can actually make the Suns really have to work on offense, even with some of the complications we're talking about that are going to be there. It's an amazing offensive roster. So yeah, some teams, if you say, hey, play out of double teams, read and react, play fast, there's a few teams that can muck that up, but most of the time you're going to be able to overcome it. Houston just did not have enough size without Brooks in there, with Jabari Smith injured down the stretch, with most of their backups being smaller guys like Aaron Holiday and Jayshawn Tate and everything else, that They just didn't have the personnel to do it, even though they're a pretty sound defense overall. That's a perfect example of the type of team the Suns are just going to be able to beat with their sheer kind of power. But yeah, let's talk about the bench a little bit here and get into some comments that Booker and Durant especially made to Kelly Iko of The Athletic, some reporting from Shams Charania. Basically, was this the turning of a page? Can that really happen in one game? More of what's sustainable and what's not off of this W. Next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On fantasy basketball host Josh Lloyd this season to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire every week, we will provide you the players that are going to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Taurean Prince. Look, when guys get minutes and put up shots, they are worth rostering in fantasy. That is what Taurean Prince is doing for the Lakers. Jalen Johnson, finally back in the Hawks lineup. Been the only bright spot for that team and hopes to hit the ground running where he left off. Isaiah Hartenstein starting in place of Mitchell Robinson, as Suns fans saw for themselves about 2 weeks ago. Jaden Ivey, finally back in the starting lineup. Yes, Detroit is awful, but if you play, again, you're going to produce, and he is doing that. Dante Exum, last but not least. We'll skip right over that one. Suns fans don't want to hear about the Mavs right now. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball, going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. I have bought numerous things from eBay Motors, including a sunshade on the interior, the flap-down one over the driver's side to block the sun out of my eyes. Very important in the Valley of the Sun. Also, a wheel cover for my front driver's side tire. It just spun right off of my car at one point, and literally nobody else had it besides eBay Motors, and it was a great price. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Whether it's brake kits, LED headlights, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motor has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Alrighty, Aaron, let's keep it going here. Let's talk about the bench real quick, and you just answer this question for me because I'm not sure how I feel yet. One, it's a little crazy to say that two guys on two-way contracts were difference makers. Like, that can be a good or a bad, right? Like, the other guys consistently underperforming to the point that those guys even got an opportunity. You could feel negatively about that. At the same time, if they produce and they both have clear NBA skills between Udoka Azubuike and Saben Lee, well, maybe that can be a positive. So I'll just ask it to you this way. Do you think those guys get minutes going forward? Was this a one-off? How serious was what we saw them do the past couple games?
I think Udoka definitely does. Like, that's the prototypical big that Vogel wanted in the first place, and that's kind of a lot of people's beef. Like, they thought that would be the change that Ayton even needed. Like, if Vogel got behind him and wanted him, like, showed him what he wanted to use him for, everybody thought that would be the next level of Ayton. I think Vogel likes bigs that can move well, rebound, know their job, rebound and defense. If you score, you score. And he's pretty physical when he gets the ball in his hands too. And I think that's like the perfect setup for a dude that can get minutes, because you make floaters in the paint and the lack of rebounding and the fouling, like, that just wasn't going to work for Vogel in the long run. And I'm glad we know it before January.
Yeah, I was wrong on Keita Bates-Diop. You were wrong on Eubanks.
I was.
We just gotta.
I was very wrong. We gotta eat that one.
Gotta own it. Yeah, it is what it is. Two-way guys just taking our dudes' minutes. It's fine. Yeah, look, I agree with you on Azubuike. I think in a backup role on a team that also wants to play small, you're talking about, I mean, what did he get last night? 19 minutes, and that was even in a game where they needed to have an answer for Şengün, and Nurkic was in foul trouble. So, and he still only got to 19, right? Because he fouls like hell still, and he turns the ball over a lot, which hasn't eaten into the Suns situation yet. He's at a 5.5% turnover rate. He's been near 18 most of his career. It's just, it's a Bismack Biyombo type of player, right? Like, he is pretty limited offensively. I do think his mobility on defense has been better than I thought it would be, just thinking back to Kansas, or I mean, I feel like maybe I saw him on the court a few times for the Jazz, even though he's not played much. His ability to move his feet defensively and execute some of the hedging and trapping that the Suns do, that'll be even more of a reason to put him out there. But again, in a role where it's like 10 minutes a night, and Metu's still playing, and Durant's still playing some front court center type stuff, like I think he's more than capable of filling that void and maybe keeping that role warm until they make a trade. I think that's still probably what Suns fans will want to see, but maybe he's just the answer and they convert him, they cut Bol and make him do a full contract. There's all sorts of options there, but we'll see with Saben Lee. I think Beal coming back, just there's too many guards already kind of in this rotation. We'll have to see how that ripples downward. But let's talk about the comments we heard from Durant and Booker from The Athletic. The key word was, or key phrase was, heated talks, I think is what they referenced it as, Aaron. And Durant said he wants to put himself and his teammates in the best position to be successful. Tonight it was good for us to go through some stuff early in the game, have those heated conversations, not talks, where we can be like, all right, this is what we're both supposed to do. Come back, talk it over again. Heated conversations can be good for teams because you can be honest and real, and then you talk it over and move on. We're all figuring it out. Booker then reiterated that, said that those types of conversations are constant. It takes a collective, and they just want to make sure things are working and that guys know what to do to play off of them. So I think that's, even as we were all kind of wondering what was up with KD's game on Christmas, and some of the body language stuff was weird, and his lack of offensive output might have made some people raise their eyebrows and everything else when Adrian Wojnarowski didn't do anybody any favors, Aaron. I think I noticed that even in that game, that the three of them, being Book, Durant, and Gordon, they were much more vocal with each other in that game than they had been, and that continued on to Wednesday. And you also throw in how much this bench was really into this game, and guys were hyped for each other, Beal and Goodwin, and guys that have had frustrating years, or with Goodwin not even playing last night, and everybody's still hyped for KD's triple-double and the big second quarter and all that stuff. Like, I don't think that in the locker room this team is falling apart the way that you might think based on some of the ugly games they've had.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, they got to lean on the injury thing for a long time, which I guess you could definitely do that, but you're not going to figure out, like, kind of what kind of guys you have unless you're winning. Like, we probably have to do this earlier, because once it gets to the playoffs and say you're down 2-1 and got to go back to the other team's home, like, you got to know what kind of dude you have. And I think finding out who the leaders are and who's going to speak up and who's going to pump you up and who's going to rip into you, like, you got to know that stuff now. So if anything, like, I'm not saying they're going to rip off 20 in a row right now, but I think potentially once this team does get to the playoffs, you got to know who are the leaders on the team. And it's good that they know that part now. And having the three, Eric Gordon, Book, and KD, be the vocal ones, like, they have to get to that part, even though it's taking losing for them to get there.
And I would say, yeah, the team realizing it, the organization, or sort of, locker room embracing it. But I would even add in there, too, the guys that are the leaders being kind of smacked in the face with the reality that they need to lead, And I'm not saying that they weren't, but I'm just saying, like, I think everybody has had a little bit of a wake-up call now on this roster of, we're not walking into anything. You know what I mean? And so whatever level of leadership or galvanizing you thought was going to be what it took, well, multiply that out by 3 or 4, because that seems to be what it's going to take. And again, that's not to say even the performance on the court, like, they were 500. It's not like they're the Grizzlies trying to fight out of a 6-19 hole. So I'm not saying that to be like the sky is falling. I'm just saying it is that kind of wake-up call. Speaking of Gordon, as somebody with Indiana roots yourself, Aaron, I feel like I would have a hard time being led by or taking seriously a guy who just very much sounds like a grandfather when he speaks. Could you give me some help on how to take him? He just has this drawl, and it is he's a very slow speaker, and it just feels like story time to me. It's just such a funny balancing of a dude who's so talented, been around the league so long. I guess maybe it fits in that case with the way that he. I just imagine like a hype speech from him, and it's like guys kind of like, all right, is he done yet? Like, are we, whatever. But maybe I'm just being rude.
I think when it comes to Eric Gordon, that if you do get excitement from him, or it's like one of those grandpa things. Like your grandpa was probably chill and always relaxed, but the times that you did hear him yell, they were pretty important. I think that's what it is with Eric Gordon. If he does have to tear into you, then you might really be messing up. And I think that's one of those kind of things where he's so calm and his face is always straight and all that if you get some real emotion out of somebody like that, you kind of have to pay attention.
He's also got the grandpa kind of drip situation going with the stocking socks and everything else. Like he is, he's putting all of it together, I feel like, and embracing that energy. But no, that's a great way to put it. And I feel like this week, the person who might have been snapped into recognition might have been the coaching staff in this case, because it seemed like Gordon was like, hey, I'm over here. You know what I mean? And obviously, a lot of it was his own aggressiveness and letting it fly, but I do think, there was probably some, let's get the lineups out there that are going to score. Look for me when I'm open. I'm not just your ninth man, like, that type of thing. And it seems like everybody responded to that. But the other thing that the coaching staff will have on its hands this upcoming weekend, potentially, is the return of Bradley Beal, who Shams Charania reports is potentially on his way back as soon as this weekend. Now, this weekend could mean Friday or Sunday, but we'll talk about what that will look like. Part 3 of the Bradley Beal return next. First, today's show brought to you by PrizePicks. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball in PrizePicks Specials League, where you can include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues in your combo. LeBron James, Travis Kelce, 10.5 threes made plus receptions. What you do then is pick more or less and watch the money roll in. No league, no head-to-head, no pool. It is just you versus the PrizePicks player projections. They also offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, all to make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to take a spin. Use the code LockedOnNBA when you do for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that is prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA or promo code LockedOnNBA when you make your first deposit to get that deposit matched up to $100. Put $100 in, PrizePicks will double it right into your account. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Okay, Aaron, so the quote from Shams is, I'm told Bradley Beal is progressing, he is ahead of schedule, and he could return as soon as this weekend. My initial instinct when I saw that come down is, why do you want to put him back out there against the Hornets? You don't need him to beat the Hornets. But then I was quickly reminded that this thing, every game has some value. There's only 52 left, and the Suns, they need every bit of continuity and chemistry building opportunity that they can get with the big three. So obviously, if he's healthy enough to play Friday, I think that's the smart thing to do. I saw your tweet of how many, wee backs do you possibly have in your back pocket to throw out there when this news comes down. What is your energy going into Friday's game and the potential third return of Bradley Beal?
I'm the most optimist pessimist, I guess. Like, I think that's where we kind of all are at now. Like, every time he goes up for a layup, we're gonna hold our breath. Like, I think every single situation, and that was a freak injury. I don't even put that on him. People have been sliding under us all season, I think. And
that's what I said heading into the year, is I was like, it's all been random injuries. There's not really a pattern to it, whatever. And then we're just living that experience again in Phoenix this year. Maybe that's just what it is for him now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I'm hoping to see what this looks like, obviously, when it's all churning, like how it looked in the preseason, when that doesn't really matter. But I just want to see what it looks like when the entire flow is going the way we kind of all imagine. And at the same time, I'm going to hold my breath every time he takes a charge, every time he's sprinting full speed, like every time he does a hezzy and goes up for a layup. Like, we're all going to be worried the entire time, but I do want to see how it works.
I'm jealous of football in this aspect where obviously that sport's brutal. It's physically insane to compete in that sport, especially as a pro, but there's such a thing as snap counts, and you can do a very specific designed thing when you're returning as a way to ease you in. If you're a pass rusher, you could just go out there on 80% of the third downs and pin your ears back and go. If you're a wide receiver, you can do some go routes and be a decoy. Like, there's no such thing as that in basketball, and that is exactly the vibe that I had in the couple of games that he was back last time, where it was like, could you just not play any defense? Like, just take it easy out there. Like, get some shots up. Treat it like some, YMCA open runs. But obviously, that's not how these guys are wired, and that would be a dumb thing to do. But it is, it's very tense watching him. And I think I'll be that way until he gets like 10, 15 games under his belt, to be honest with you. But the one thing that I feel like was positive this most recent time, one thing, when these guys were together, it worked great. They were running really sophisticated offense. They were flowing really well. I think that'll snap into place pretty easily, especially based on what we've seen with Allen and Gordon in those spots. You put Beal in there, it's like, okay, I know what that will look like. But the bigger thing, or another big thing, was his defense was a lot better this most recent time he was back versus the first time where he got, beaten up by the Thunder, beaten up by even Kobe White before everyone caught on to that Kobe White was actually pretty good now, and a bunch of different matchups seemed to be too much for him. So that felt good, and this is only an ankle. The back thing, as far as we know, hasn't affected him. So I guess that's another positive of we're now like a month out from the back thing being a problem, even though it feels like he got hurt again. So there is reason to be optimistic, but that's easy enough to say. And seeing it happen will be a different thing.
Yeah, and it's the teams are gonna attack him. Like, you're gonna see how healthy he really is. Like, a dude that's been hurt more than 50% of the season so far, you're gonna have to test that. And it's not like it comes off as being a jerk, but when somebody's injury prone and they're always hurt and all that, like, teams are gonna put him to the test. He's gonna get switched a lot, and we're just going to have to hope that he holds up and he still has his legs for offense.
Let me just throw this at you because we have a couple minutes and I'm curious. The Suns have a 6-game homestand that is starting on Friday. They play the Hornets, Magic, Blazers, Heat, and then
Clippers.
Grizzlies, Clippers. And they have 2 back-to-backs in there. One is Magic Portland. The other is Grizzlies Clippers. What's the record in that 6 games?
I can see us splitting, going 3-3 sometimes. Like, I can see 3-3. I hope it's higher, but we still have so much more to see from this team. Like, yeah, we didn't have Nurk for a couple, and if we get Beal back, even though like Nurk is still, there's sometimes where he still wants to be a scorer when there are 3 out there. And that was kind of the bigger thing when people liked Udoka. It was like, he's not looking to score. He knows he's not there to score. If KD and Booker are on the floor with you, you don't have to think about that anymore. And I kind of like the vibe of and the smoothness of that, and just not having him make decisions. Like, Nurk makes good decisions sometimes, but there are turnovers still. And I think just not having a center that needs or wants to make decisions was kind of nice, and to make the offense run smoother. So I'm not going to take anything from the Houston game like too much, but we still need to see if they can put a couple together and see if this offense can run as smooth as it did yesterday.
Well, that's the thing about it feels like Azubuike, at least stylistically, is kind of the middle ground between Eubanks and Nurkic. The thing that Nurkic does to add to what you're saying is I feel like he also can slow the offense down at times.
Yeah.
Because he wants to sit there and read and do all this stuff, and it's like, okay, but get the ball out of your hands. You know what I mean? Like, get it, but keep it moving, So Azubuike, it's like he's bigger. He can finish, he, whatever, but he also plays with the motor that Eubanks does, which was huge. But which game are you most excited to see out of those 6? Because when I first looked at this a while ago, I felt like it was a little potentially a doable homestand. Now it's like Portland's playing a little better. The Clippers have really locked in. Ja is back. I'm like, okay, never mind. I don't think this is actually. And I said wrong that there was a back-to-back with the Clippers. That actually is the next time they play the Clippers. The end of this homestand goes right into a road game on a back-to-back against the Clippers, so that's not part of this 6. But which of those matchups do you want to see the most, or which one are you looking forward to testing the Suns the most?
Clippers, because Ty Lue, the defenses that he throws at you, he's just a really good defensive mind, and whatever he does, the Suns are in, especially if it works, and especially if we're full speed, everybody's going to use it. Like, this is going to be the tape that pretty much everybody's going to use if it works. So that's probably the one I'm looking forward to, is how they attack us and how they defend us, because Ty Lue's a pretty smart guy, and wherever we see in that game, we're going to see a lot probably.
I'll go Grizzlies because I'm still intrigued. I mean, Ja was the name I threw out there over and over during the offseason and preseason with the type of player the Suns might struggle to defend with their point of attack problems. So what their answer for him is, especially if we're in a situation where they're playing Okogie and Goodwin less, is going to be interesting. And that'll be a big test for them, I guess, kind of on the other end of the floor from what you said. But that will wrap us up for the week. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe wherever you found the show today. Become an everyday or get locked onto the Suns all season long right here with Locked On Suns. I will catch you guys next week.